When I was just 15, my family left me alone at a crowded airport and flew to another state on purpose. They said it was to teach me a lesson. I had nothing but a small bag, $100, and a heartbreaking in real time. I cried until I couldn't breathe. Then, with shaking hands, I made one call to my uncle. What happened next? Let's just say when my parents landed, their celebration turned into their worst nightmare. And that was only the beginning. I'm Nora Bennett, and this is the story I never thought I'd tell out loud. But sometimes silence becomes too heavy to carry, and the past refuses to stay buried. So here it is, my truth, plain and raw. It started when I was 15. That age where you think you're starting to understand the world, but really, you're just beginning to see its sharp edges. We were at the Phoenix airport, just another supposed family trip. My mom, Renee, was fussing over my younger brother, Ethan, who was 13 at the time, while my dad, Greg, stood off to the side, checking his watch like he couldn't wait to get this over with. I remember dragging my little suitcase behind me, my headphones on, trying to drown out their usual bickering. Ethan looked nervous, like he knew something I didn't. I didn't see it coming. Not the way it happened. We were near the gate when Mom suddenly handed me a folded $20 bill and said, "Go grab us some snacks, sweetie. You've got time." She smiled, the way she always did when she wanted something. Not warmth, just performance. I took the money and went. I should have known better. There was something strange in the air, some kind of tension. But I told myself I was overthinking, that they wouldn't do what my gut was whispering. I came back maybe 10 minutes later, juggling chips, sodas, and a pretzel. But the seats where we'd been sitting were empty.
Gone.
No sign of them. I scanned the area, then ran to the gate, my heart pounding. The flight was boarding. I didn't see them in line. I didn't see them anywhere. I must have stood there like a statue, holding those snacks, staring around as the crowd moved past me. I tried calling my mom's phone, then my dad's. Straight to voicemail. I called again. And again. Still nothing. I didn't cry right away. I think I was too numb. I sat down near the window and stared at the runway, waiting for them to come back. Waiting for this to be a mistake. But deep down I knew. This wasn't a mistake. An hour passed. Then 2. That's when the tears came. And not the quiet kind. I was sitting by baggage claim, hugging my knees, crying so hard people started giving me those awkward looks, the kind people give when they don't know if they should help or stay away. Eventually, I pulled out my phone again. I had exactly $100 in my pocket. That's all I had to my name. Just me and a suitcase. And one number left to call. Uncle Ray. He was my dad's older brother. They hadn't spoken in years. Some fight I was never told the full story about. But I remembered him from when I was little. He'd always smiled at me like he meant it. Always treated me like a person, not a burden. I didn't even know if the number still worked, but I called anyway. He picked up on the second ring. "Nora?" His voice was scratchy, like he hadn't used it in hours. My own voice cracked when I spoke. "Uncle Ray, they left me. I'm at the airport. I don't know what to do." There was a pause, then a sharp inhale. "What airport? Where are you?" "Phoenix, Sky Harbor." "I'll be there," he said without hesitation. "Just sit tight. I'm coming." He drove 6 hours through the night from Flagstaff to get me. When he finally arrived, I was slumped against the wall by a vending machine, red-eyed and hollow. He wrapped me in a hug so tight I felt something break and heal all at once. Ray took me home that night. And just like that, he became my real family. Not by blood, but by choice. My parents didn't call. Not that night. Not the next. Not for weeks. When they finally did, weeks later, it was an email. A short one. Cold. "Hope you figured things out. Life is tough. You need to learn how to survive on your own." That was it. No apology. No explanation. Nothing about Ethan, or what they told him. Just a blank wall of silence wrapped in cruelty. I spent the next few years clawing my way through high school. Ray didn't have much. He worked long days at his auto shop, but he gave me something I'd never really had before. Safety. A quiet place to sleep. Warm meals. Someone who asked how my day was and actually cared. I worked evenings after school, diners, grocery stores, anywhere that would take a 16-year-old. I saved every dime. I stopped hoping they'd come back for me. I stopped waiting. College was a fight. Scholarships, loans, part-time jobs. I studied journalism like it was oxygen. I wanted to tell stories. Real ones. Stories people didn't want to say out loud. Maybe because no one had told mine. By 24, I was a junior reporter for a Denver magazine. By 30, I was editor-in-chief. I built a life from ashes. Brick by brick. My own apartment. My own company car. My own name on the door. Nora Bennett. Not Greg's daughter. Not Renee's mistake. Just me. Things were quiet for a long time. I didn't talk about the past. I didn't think I needed to. But pain has a funny way of circling back when you least expect it. It was a Thursday when the first voicemail came. I was sipping coffee at my desk, halfway through editing a cover story. The number was unfamiliar. I almost let it go. Then another one. Then 3. I played 1. Nora, it's Ethan. My heart skipped. I know it's been a long time. I didn't know what they did to you, not really. But we need help. Can you call me back? His voice was older, of course. But the way he said we, that word made something cold crawl up my spine. I didn't call back. Not right away. Instead, I sat there in my glass-walled office, the Denver skyline glowing behind me, holding my phone like it might burn me. Because after all these years, the past wasn't just knocking. It was breaking down the door. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, phone clutched in my hand like it held some kind of answer. Ethan's voice kept looping in my head, that soft, unsure tone. We need help. We. Not just him. I knew exactly who he meant. Greg and Renee. My parents. The people who walked away from me without blinking. By morning, I'd listened to every voicemail. There were 6 in total, each one more desperate than the last. The final one said, "Please, Nora, just meet me. One time. I'll explain everything. I just want to talk." So I said yes. Not for them. For him. Because the boy I remembered, the one who used to sneak me candy when our parents weren't looking, who used to sit next to me when things got loud at home, he didn't deserve to be ignored. Even if I wasn't sure I could look him in the eye. We met at a small cafe off Colfax Avenue. It was still dark outside, not quite 6 in the morning. I got there early. My nerves were a mess, but I hid it behind a coffee cup. When Ethan walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked older than 30. Tired. Like someone who had carried too much for too long. But he smiled when he saw me. A hesitant, broken smile. "Hey," he said softly. I nodded. "Hey." He slid into the booth across from me, eyes searching mine like he was still trying to figure out who I'd become. "You look good. Different. Grown." "I am," I said, keeping my tone neutral. He gave a quiet laugh, but it didn't last long. "I wasn't sure you'd come." I wasn't sure either. A long pause stretched between us. Then he cleared his throat. "Things are bad," he said. "Dad lost most of their savings gambling. Mom's credit cards are maxed out. The house is in foreclosure. They're drowning." I didn't say anything. I just stared at him, waiting. "They've changed," he added quickly. "They're not the same people. They left me at an airport, Ethan," I said, my voice calm but sharp, "with $100, and they didn't come back." He flinched, looking down. "I didn't know. I swear. I thought we were just going on a trip. They told me you'd meet us later, that you were mad and needed time alone." I swallowed hard. That lie, after all this time, still had the power to cut. He looked up at me, eyes wide and pleading. "Please, Nora. They're not well. They need help. And they miss you. They really do." I set my cup down slowly. "They don't miss me. They miss what I can give them." He blinked. "That's not fair." "No," I said, my voice steady. "What's not fair is a 15-year-old girl sitting at a gate waiting for her parents, realizing they were never coming back." Ethan sat back, like the weight of it was finally settling on his shoulders. So, that's it? You won't even talk to them? I am talking.
To you.
I pulled a few bills from my wallet and dropped them on the table. I'm sorry, Ethan. But I'm not their second chance. I stood up and walked out before he could say anything else. My heart was pounding, my breath tight in my chest, but I didn't stop. Not until I got to my car and slammed the door shut. I thought that would be the end of it. I'd said what needed to be said. I chose myself. But they weren't done with me. 2 days later, Samantha, my assistant, knocked on my office door, her face pale and tight. Hey, she said carefully. You might want to see this. She handed me her phone. It was open to a Facebook post. Our daughter, Nora, abandoned us. After everything we gave her. After raising her and sacrificing so much. Now, when we're old and struggling, she turns her back on us like we're strangers. My blood ran cold. The post had hundreds of likes, dozens of comments. People I didn't know, strangers calling me selfish, heartless, greedy. Some even tagging my magazine's page. They're twisting everything, Samantha whispered. It's spreading. The next day, anonymous emails started hitting our inbox. Accusations that I stole from my parents. That I owed everything to them. That I built my career off money they gave me.
Clients were forwarding them.
Some asked for meetings. One even pulled out of a deal we'd been working on for months. It was sabotage. I had a team meeting that afternoon. My staff looked uncomfortable, confused. Samantha pulled me aside after. What do you want to do? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. I spent the night rereading those emails, those comments. Each one chipped away at the walls I'd spent years building. But it wasn't until I traced the IP address from one of the anonymous emails, and it came back to an address tied to my parents, that something inside me snapped. They weren't just trying to guilt me. They were trying to destroy me. The next morning, I opened my laptop and wrote a post. Just a few paragraphs. Nothing fancy. Just the truth. When I was 15, my parents left me at an airport in Phoenix with $100 and no way home. They never came back. They told people it was a lesson in independence. I call it what it was, abandonment. I told the rest, too. About Uncle Ray. About building my life from scratch. About the silence, the lies, the years without a word, until they needed something. Then I hit post. The response was immediate. Messages flooded in. Some from strangers sharing similar stories. Some offering support. Others just saying, "We believe you." The tide began to turn. But the damage had already started. That week, my parents filed a lawsuit. I got the letter delivered to my office. A thick envelope stamped by a law firm. Greg and Renee Bennett versus Nora Bennett. They were suing me under a filial responsibility clause, demanding financial support. I stared at the paperwork for a long time. My reflection in the office window was calm, almost still. But inside, a storm had started. They were really doing it. They weren't just ghosts from my past anymore. They were coming for me in the present. And they weren't stopping. I wish I could say I was surprised when the lawsuit landed on my desk, but I wasn't. Somewhere deep down, I knew it was coming. My parents were never the kind of people to walk away quietly, especially when they thought they had something to gain. Still, reading my name printed on that legal document, Greg and Renee Bennett versus Nora Bennett, it hit me like a punch to the gut. Samantha found me standing at the window of my office, the letter still in my hand. "Do you want me to call Leo?" she asked gently. I nodded without turning around. Leo Chavez was my lawyer, sharp and steady, the kind of person who didn't flinch under pressure. He read through the lawsuit while I sat across from him, silent, waiting. When he finally looked up, he shook his head. "They're filing under a filial responsibility clause," he said. "Some states enforce it more than others. Colorado isn't strict about it, but if they make enough noise, it could drag out. Publicly, it's already messy." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling through my nose. "So, what are you saying? They're trying to force me to pay for the life they ruined?" He gave a small, tight nod. "That's exactly what they're trying to do." We discussed strategy. He advised caution, careful language, avoiding escalation. But I was done playing small. "Let them come," I told him. I'm not backing down. In the days that followed, the smear campaign only got louder. Fake accounts on social media kept popping up, spreading stories that I was cold, heartless, that I left my aging parents to rot while I lived a life of luxury. Some of these posts tagged our business partners, advertisers, clients. It was deliberate, coordinated.
And it worked.
Some sponsors pulled out. One board member questioned my leadership. A few longtime readers canceled their subscriptions. People love drama, especially when it comes with just enough lies to sound like truth. But I refused to let them own the story. I called another team meeting. This time, I stood in front of the staff and told them everything. Not in detail, not with emotion, but with clarity. I told them about my childhood, about being left behind, about what was happening now, about the lawsuit and the harassment. They were quiet when I finished, but no one left. No one judged me. Some even came up after to offer their support. One of our junior writers, someone I barely knew, handed me a sticky note that just said, "You're not alone." That night, I posted again. Not just a paragraph this time, but a full statement.
Calm.
Factual.
Honest.
I built my life without them. Every job, every apartment, every sleepless night, I earned on my own. My success doesn't belong to anyone but me. I will not be shamed into silence. I will not fund the people who abandoned me. The post went viral within hours. People started pushing back against the narrative my parents had crafted. Comments rolled in, some from strangers, some from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Survivors. Fighters. People who had walked away from toxic families and lived to tell the story. And then, just when I thought maybe it was finally starting to settle, they showed up. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was reviewing final edits for the next issue when Samantha buzzed through the intercom. Her voice was tense. "There's a couple here in the lobby. They say they're your parents." I didn't move. For a second, I just stared at the screen in front of me, not reading a single word. "They're making a scene," she added quietly. Of course they were. I stood slowly and walked out into the lobby. There they were. Renee, dressed like she was attending a funeral, complete with a handkerchief pressed to her cheek. Greg, arms folded, wearing that same old scowl that used to silence entire rooms. "Nora," Renee said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Please, honey, just talk to us." My stomach tightened. Greg stepped forward. "You think you're too good for us now, huh? You forget who raised you." I looked around the lobby. My staff was watching. Some were filming. I didn't care anymore. "You left me," I said clearly. "At 15. Alone. At an airport." Renee gasped a little too dramatically. "That's not fair. You needed to grow up." It was a tough love lesson. "No," I said, keeping my voice calm. "It was abandonment." Greg's face twisted. "We made you strong. Everything you have is because of us. You taught me what not to become." Security was already on their way. I gave them a nod. "Please escort these people out. You're going to regret this," Greg hissed as they were led away. Renee's voice was softer, but no less poisonous. Poor girl. So much success, but no heart. The doors closed behind them. I went back to my office and shut the door. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From fury. Because I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. They would keep pushing until I stopped them for good. The next morning, I found an envelope slipped under my office door. No return address. Inside was a single note, typed and signed. "You don't get to erase us." I read it once, then again, and then I smiled. Because they were right. I wasn't erasing them. I was rising without them. After they were escorted out of my office building, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally back off. But with people like my parents, backing off isn't in their nature. A few days passed without anything new, and I started to believe they'd run out of moves. Then the next blow came, not in person, not online, but through my business. One of our biggest investors forwarded me an email. It had screenshots, quotes pulled from nowhere, and accusations that I had a history of fraud, specifically financial misconduct involving my parents. The claim said I stole money from them, used their resources to build my career, and left them destitute. Anonymous sources. No facts. But the intent was clear. I could feel the heat rising at my neck as I read each word. This wasn't just a smear campaign anymore. This was an attack on everything I'd built. I called Leo. "They're playing dirty," I said.
He sighed.
"We can prove it's false. But if these claims reach the media, it could damage you more than the court case ever could. So what now? You fight back. Not just legally, but publicly." I hung up and stared at my reflection in the office window. Behind me, the city moved on like it always did. But inside me, everything slowed. My parents didn't want help. They wanted control. And when they couldn't get it with guilt or lies, they tried to burn down what I had built. So I gave them what they never expected.
The truth.
All of it. That night, I sat at my desk and wrote the most personal story I had ever shared. I didn't hold back. I told the world how I was left at 15 in a crowded airport, how I waited for them to come back, how they never did. I wrote about the $100 in my pocket, the 6-hour drive Uncle Ray made to get me, the years I spent working 2, sometimes 3 jobs while putting myself through school. I wrote about building my life with no handouts, no favors, just grit and survival. And I ended it simply. Family isn't defined by DNA. It's defined by love, loyalty, and who shows up. I chose myself. And I will continue to choose myself, no matter who tries to rewrite the past. I posted it just before midnight. By morning, it had gone viral. Messages poured in from all over the country, people thanking me for saying what they were too afraid to say themselves. Survivors of toxic families. People estranged from abusive parents. People who had walked away, and those who wanted to but didn't know how. The support was overwhelming. And for the first time in days, I breathed. The lawsuit dropped a week later. I didn't even have to countersue. Once they lost the public sympathy, they lost their power. Their lawyer backed off. Investors and clients returned. Some even praised me for handling the whole thing with grace and honesty. That should have been the end. But it wasn't. One evening, about a month after the storm had finally settled, there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened it, there he was. Ethan. He looked even more tired than the last time I saw him. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his shoulders were slumped like the weight of all our history was pressing down on him. "Nora," he said, voice cracking. "Can I talk to you?" I didn't answer. I just stepped aside and let him in. He sat on the edge of the couch like he wasn't sure he belonged there. "They lost the house," he said quietly. "Dad's drinking again. Mom keeps blaming everyone but herself. Me included." I didn't say anything. "They still think you owe them something." I looked at him carefully. "And what do you think?" He swallowed hard. "I think they broke something they can't fix. And I hate them for it. But I also hate how it's tearing everything apart." "I didn't break this," I said softly. "They did." "I know." His voice was barely a whisper. There was a long silence between us. Then, tears in his eyes, he said, "I just don't want to lose you too." I leaned forward, my voice firm but not unkind. "You didn't lose me, Ethan."
They did.
"And I'm not going back. I'm not stepping into that fire again just to make them feel better. I survived once. I won't crawl back just because they finally hit the bottom." He nodded, wiping his face. "I get it." I stood and walked him to the door. "Take care of yourself," I said. Truly. He left without asking for anything more. That was the first real sign he might be healing too. Later that night, I poured a glass of wine and sat out on my small balcony, the Denver lights flickering like tiny promises in the dark. The air was cool, peaceful, and for the first time in years, quiet. I opened my contacts and found Uncle Ray's name.
"Dinner this weekend?"
My treat. His reply came in seconds. "Finally. I've been waiting. Mexican or Italian?" I smiled. "Mexican. Extra margaritas." Then I went to my blocked contacts list and removed 2 numbers. Not to talk. Not to reconnect. Just so I could see them there and know that I had a choice. And I chose peace. Again. Always.